Hannah Murray on TRE in the afternoon.
Joining us on the line now is Poppy Jamie. She's an author, broadcaster and entrepreneur. She hosts one of the UK's top spiritual wellness podcasts, Unwind with Poppy. As a proud mystic and tarot reader, Poppy balances her background in cognitive science with the esoteric. In her book, The Book of Magical Living, Poppy reveals 8 secrets for living magically, returning you to the intuition you were taught to silence, the signs that were always speaking, and a life far more extraordinary than logic ever allowed you to believe. Welcome to the show, Poppy.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's so lovely to chat with you. So tell me about your introduction to magic. I know your mum was really influential.
My mum is one of the most magical people that I've ever met, but I think magic is one of those things that it's easier to describe as a feeling because everybody knows what magic feels like. Everybody has had one of those moments in their life that they cannot believe unfolded. For example, the night that you didn't want to go out and yet you dragged yourself and you met the love of your life. Or the time when you missed the train and actually, because you missed the train, you managed to see an advert that then completely changed the direction of course of travel. Or that time where you thought about someone and 2 minutes later they're calling you and they're not someone who usually calls you. All of these weird, and I don't believe in coincidences. Some wise woman once told me, a coincidence is just a coordinated instance. But these very strange moments happen to all of us, and we all have a choice. We can either dismiss them as, oh God, that was lucky, or gosh, coincidence, or, you dismiss it. But actually, the book and the reason I wrote it is to say, no, take a pause, because those moments are so unusual. Even the fact that we are all born at something like 1 in 400 trillion is the chance of being born, and yet we're here. Actually, when we start to look at life going, there's magic everywhere. It's only if we choose to see these moments and actually go, is there a reason for them? Does magic start to really open up and almost you experience more of it?
Yeah. And have you always felt the same? Because my mum was always really spiritual. And when I was growing up, I remember she wasn't like anybody else. And so a lot of the time it was like, she's so different and it's all a bit weird. And it was only when I became an adult that I started to really, really appreciate how amazingly connected to so many things she was.
I couldn't agree more with you. That's exactly how I felt. When we were little, she used to hypnotize us when we were 11. If we had a bad day at school or somebody was upsetting us, she would sit us down for a hypnosis, which was deeply strange in the 90s and early 2000s. And so she was always very ahead, and she was a Reiki healer. And so whenever we broke an arm, suddenly our arms and broken bones and scratches, they would always heal just a little bit faster. And I guess we just took it for granted a little bit until I ventured out on my own and moved countries, and I started to really recognize my mother's powers. And it started to realize that we all have the capacity to evolve stronger intuition, to evolve this unbelievable ability for the mind to influence the body. But so often we just don't give the time, or we are so lost in the day-to-day of our lives that we forget we have these incredible magical abilities.
Yeah. And what about your connection with tarot reading? How has that helped you? Because I know you do tarot reading and you also go to tarot readers.
Yes, I think tarot is an amazing tool to explore the subconscious. So there's this thing in science called information theory, and it says that we are being bombarded with 10,000 pieces of information a second, and yet we can only process 50. So that means you've got all this information that your brain, without you even knowing, is filtering out. So you can imagine all the information that you're not seeing because you're focused on one particular direction, because your brain is very efficient. It only wants to tell you things that it thinks you will think is important. But the problem is, there's obviously lots of things it's missing. So the beauty of tarot, it's a psychological tool to explore the subconscious. And there's lots of ways we can work with wisdom. You can read a book. Hopefully you'll enjoy the Book of Magical Living, or you could speak to someone wise. But tarot cards are kind of a picture form of wisdom. And so when you pull the cards, it connects with you in a story type way because every card tells a story, and it helps to expand what you are noticing. It helps you to ask questions that maybe you haven't asked yourself. And it's interesting because if you get asked the right question, suddenly you can come up with a solution you didn't even know existed to different problems in your life.
Yeah. I think people sort of dismiss tarot reading sometimes because they think it's fortune telling, and that always has a bad reputation, I suppose. A lot of this stuff kind of does, doesn't it? You think of the witchy woman with the crystal ball, and it all seems people don't believe a lot of it, do they? They find it all a bit woo-woo.
Right. And this is what the book really focuses on, is actually looking at the new science that is validating all the things that we dismissed as, oh gosh, that's just a witchy woo thing, not for me, quack, just crazy women or crazy men over there. And actually, when you start to look at the science is saying the same thing as ancient magical wisdom has always known. And so it's interesting because prior to the understanding of, what a witch was, wise women were the people that we would go to back in the day before kind of the 1500s. If you were worried about something, if you were sick, you'd go to a wise woman to find you herbs to soothe your mind. They were our first psychologists, our first herbalists, our first doctors, our first midwives. They would be bringing life into this world. They'll be helping people die peacefully. But these women had so much influence over their local communities, they became a threat to the institution. And so it was in their interest to say, well, how do we stop people from going to wise women? Let's suggest they're dangerous. And so this is why we even developed this idea of the witch being dangerous, when actually, really, the witch was a wise woman that helped humanity evolve. So the science, when you start to look at these things where you go tarot and you kind of eye roll, actually, a wonderful woman called Dike Begg, she's a Jungian psychologist, she once said, character is destiny, but you can always change your character. And what I love about tarot is that it really helps you to understand yourself, because if obviously we will never change, we can pretty much predict our future if we continue doing the same thing over and over again. The point of these tools is to help you to go, do I want to continue doing the same thing? Am I happy with what I have right now? What could I change that's going to give me a different future? So it's funny because I don't necessarily advocate for fortune telling, although I do think there's some incredibly very powerful psychics in the world. And I do think that a lot of people have this ability to have premonition, to have visions of the future. But I think that these tools are more important for exploring how we respond to life and what that life will create if we don't make some changes.
Yeah. I love a quote from your book. The future does not need more data. It needs people who can feel what the data cannot measure. I love that.
Yes, it's, I got so sick of all these trackers. I was the girl, I was a biohacker girl. I would be having my rings, my aura rings, my Whoop bands, everything. And I would wake up in the morning and I would look at my technology to ask how I had slept without asking myself first.
Yes.
And I think how ridiculous that we now need data to tell us how we feel in the morning, rather than just going, but how do I feel? Sort of thing. And immediately, if the data says, oh, you've slept terribly, you're on the red, you've barely recovered, suddenly you go, I'm going to have a terrible day. How am I going to make my best decisions? Because, my watch has told me that I've slept badly. Whereas I think if we need to go back, return to our intuition, because if we wake up in the morning and even if we feel a bit tired, say, okay, that wasn't the best night's sleep, but I'm going to have a great day. You're far more likely to have a great day. There's studies that say those that believe they are more luckier have much higher well-being. And it's a real state of mind that I think technology can erode at and actually take away our sense of hope and optimism for the day. And that's what we really need to, as the world is becoming so much more quantifiable. We need a number, or, we need something for everything, when actually some of the most powerful things in life don't have numbers attached. And that's the important thing about them.
Some of another thing that you look at in the book, which I think's fascinating, is the whole thing of signs after a loved one has passed, and these signs that are sometimes connected to them that feel really significant, or sometimes it's not necessarily connected to them. You know, I've seen things about animals and how animals are really powerful in what they carry with them, and if an animal's like looking directly at you in the eye, you know, sometimes it can be seen as a sign. What are your thoughts on all that?
So I am passionate about signs. Signs and synchronicities was something that this early 20th century psychologist Carl Jung studied. And I appreciate his work so much because he actually brings some science and psychology to something that feels a bit wacky, right? This idea that someone who's passed can send you a sign of communication could sound ludicrous to most people, but actually there is enough people that can tell you amazing stories about their signs that can make even the greatest skeptic think, well, I guess no one knows what happens when we die. You know, NASA says we've only tracked 5% of the universe. 95% still remains a complete mystery. And I think that is really exciting because if the world we live in, 95% is a mystery, why can't past loved ones send you a sign that only you will know it's from them? And so growing up, my mother would see white feathers in the most random places. It would be in torrential rain going through the English countryside. And suddenly there'd be this pristine feather. And it would just be in that moment where we were talking about something that was really worrying the family. And she would see the white feather and she'd say, oh, it's going to be okay. And someone even last week, someone who actually worked with me on the book, her grandfather had passed and he always wore a piece of red clothing every single day. And he also had a parrot in his life. Anyway, she was sitting in Hyde Park with her granny and her mother, and they were sitting on a park bench, and a parrot sat on the park bench with them, and the parrot had a red beak. And they all looked at this parrot just perching on this arm of this bench, and they just knew it was him, and he'd passed a few days before. And it's very difficult to rationally explain these things. And yet just there's a part of you deep down that knows that we shouldn't dismiss them.
Yeah. And it's really comforting. You know, of course, there'll be scientific people that go, well, how is this, you know, trying to understand it from a logical scientific point of view. And as you said, it really is very difficult to try and explain or rationalize. But at the end of the day, it's a beautiful thing to happen.
It is. And, you know, if we don't have evidence for something, that's not evidence for no evidence sort of thing. You can't say, well, we haven't proved it, so we know it's not true. We have evidence. We don't have evidence for either way. So as a consequence, why not keep an open mind? But it's interesting because in 2022, the Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded to a physicist that had observed quantum entanglement, the idea that two particles, despite time and space, can stay connected. Now, obviously, you know, it's not saying humans can stay connected despite time and space, you know, after death. But what are we made out of? We are made up out of particles. So in the future, if they can observe particles staying connected despite time and space, then what does that mean for humanity? You know, premonition, 78% 78% of people have experienced telephone telepathy. The idea that you think about someone and then they call. Now that is that research comes from Rupert Sheldrake, who's an incredible 80-year-old physicist that has spent his lifetime looking into experiments in this sort of world. And so, you know, the fringe of science is exploring these things. But I do think the magic is not really needing the science. It's being able to open up our mind to experience this mystical magic that's open to all of us.
Yeah. And the other thing to remember is that science changes. You know, there was a time when people thought that the sun the sun was the center. No, I'm going to say it the wrong way around now. The earth was the center of the universe and the sun was going round, and people were put in prison because they thought this, and then it was proved to be the opposite of that. And there's been so many scientific things that have been proved wrong over the years. We live and learn, science moves on, and different things change.
And we also have to validate the human experience. When someone has had this incredible experience of connecting with someone beyond the grave as such, why don't we believe them? Do you know what I mean? Like we need to trust our own experience of life as well.
Yeah, you've had
and
some.
The book
Sorry,
really helps you. That was so saying. The book really helps you to do that. That is the point of the book: is to open up our eyes to all the things that potentially we've been overlooking.
Yeah. You've had some great feedback on the book. I know lots of people who are really, really enjoying it. And you've got some great quotes from Lily James, Charlotte Tilbury. And I mean, what do things like that mean to you? How does that help with the book, I guess?
Oh, so much so. I mean, Charlotte Tilbury in particular is the most magical person I think I've ever met. I mean, she is maybe one of the most successful women in the whole of the world. She's built one of the biggest beauty companies in the world, and she lives by these magical principles. And she was actually one of the first people to really educate me about some of this wisdom. I'd experienced it through my mother, but she was someone who every single day practiced it and has built the most incredible life based on it. So she is such an icon. She walks into a room and she changes the energy of the room. And that was one of the big inspirations for the book. I was fascinated by these women that have unbelievable energetic presence. And so, and Dr. Tara Swart, the wonderful neuroscientist, she really wrote such a beautiful quote for the book. And that was important too, because in a world where, we do want to be skeptical, to have such a profound neuroscientist like Dr. Tara Swart say, I totally believe in this book, was huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And so do you think we can sort of create our own luck in a way then?
I absolutely think that we can create our own luck. There's a great quote that says, if you think you can, or if you think you can't, you're right. And I think that one of the most magical phenomenons is the placebo effect. We know the mind has enormous impact over the body. My mum always used to say, if you can make your little toe wiggle, what else can your mind do? That's invisible. We're not, you invisibly send a message to your little toe to wiggle. So, and the book explains why we can create our own luck, and that it requires us to believe we're lucky for it to open up. So it's the brain is a very, very powerful tool, especially when we know how to use it.
Yeah. I think it's amazing some of the statistics for these subjects online and how popular they are. Witch Talk, 90 billion views, one of the largest communities on social media. I didn't know that. Astrology, now a $15 billion industry. Tarot, $1 billion industry. That's amazing. I mean, it can't all be fake if that many people are living by it and are interested in it, can it?
Oh, 100%. I think the data is showing that there was another study that said that nearly 50% of women have consulted a tarot reader, a fortune teller, a psychic in the last year. I think we are waking up to the fact there is more to life, and I think we are all looking for more. I don't think as we go back to technology with this kind of onslaught of AI coming. AI obviously is an amazing technology, but it's not humans. An AI can't go in a shower and suddenly come up with the best idea ever. That's human innovation.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important to celebrate what makes us so special as humans. The fact that you can have these ideas and these desires that come out of nowhere, and suddenly we have created, penicillin. We have suddenly created, human beings are incredible. And I think we don't celebrate our unique capacity enough.
Yeah, for sure. Well, if people want to get a copy of the Book of Magical Living, 8 Secrets to Inner Power, it's available on our website, tre.radio, and it's by Poppy Jamie, who we've been chatting with today. Poppy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and I really hope people enjoy the book, and it's been delightful to talk to you, so thanks for having me on.
My pleasure.